Okay, dokes. I'm here in the Philadelphia Convention Center, and I have just come out of the American Muslim Democratic Delegate Luncheon with Aman Sharif, who is, okay, now, his sister's cousin. Did I
My
get that
dad's
wrong?
cousin.
His dad's cousin is this really cool guy who I talked to a few minutes ago, and he said, You gotta talk to Aman. So here we are. Well, share with us the thoughts you have that you'd like to raise for folks at home who couldn't come here this week,
People who couldn't come here this week.
as in everyone in
So,
America.
as in everyone in America. Um, First thing is that this election is important. This election is so important. Um, we are living in a country now that has that is growing in diversity, where minorities are growing, and you have a presidential candidate out there who wants to eliminate us, who wants us to go away, who wants us to vanish. For some of us, this is a really fundamental issue. I can so easily draw the line between Donald Trump getting elected and me personally ending up in an internment camp. Wesley Clark, General Wesley Clark, about 6 months ago, said, "Hey, maybe we should do what we did during World War II with the Japanese, with Muslims." I can see that line so clearly. So for some of us, it really is an existential election. It's an existential election, I think, for everyone else as well, because there is a candidate that doesn't think before he speaks. He invited a foreign power, encourages foreign powers to commit espionage. Um, he said that we will not back up our allies. He has said that millionaires, billionaires should pay more in taxes, and then releases a tax plan that would give the wealthiest an immense tax cut and bankrupt our country. This really is an existential election for us, for everyone in America. Um, it's amazing how little Donald Trump knows about anything. If you're sick and tired of the system, at least don't elect somebody who doesn't even understand what is happening, who doesn't understand how basics in taxes and foreign policy and in general public security even works, doesn't even understand what it is. So I think that is the single most important thing for everyone who isn't here to keep in mind. If you don't want a politician to be president, a career politician to be president, at least pick somebody who understands the issues. That person isn't Donald Trump. And it may sound kind of crazy, but for a lot of people, for Latino, Hispanic families in America, for other immigrant groups, this is possibly, not just possible, very much so, an existential crisis for us, for all of America. I mean, the thing that, and he's dividing America. This may be a little bit hyperbolic, but it reminds me of a quote that Abraham Lincoln said during a State of the Union address um, during the Civil War. And he said this about the war. He said, "We shall nobly, we shall nobly save or meanly lose the last best hope of earth." And for me, that very much is what America is, the last best hope for Earth. So much good has come out of this country. Let's keep that going. We are an amazing symbol of hope. We have a responsibility to live up to our own ideals.
Which raises that question you were talking about earlier about our history.
Yeah. Um, we are also at a point in our country where it's time for us to face our own past. And I say us because it doesn't matter if you are a first generation American or if you can trace your heritage back to the US Civil War. We have a shared history, and we are now hitting a point in our history where we need to face our past. And what that means is acknowledging the bad things that we have done so that we can move forward and solve the issues that we're facing now, whether it's racial divisions, police brutality, um, payday loans.
Yeah.
It's we need to face that, because that's and acknowledge that these are bad things, so that we can actually solve our problems and live up to the ideals that bring so many immigrants to the United States.
And that is a great goal, which some people would think, oh gosh, that's so hard to achieve. But didn't Nelson Mandela take a beautiful step forward in that direction?
He did. I mean, a lot of people are afraid of facing our past because it's uncomfortable and because it might mean something way too big that is a cost and a burden. Uh, like reparations. Nobody is saying that we should have reparations for the descendants of slaves. But Nelson Mandela came up with the idea of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission. All that did was sit people in rooms together and talk about the horrible things that happened, those who committed them and those who were the victims of it, and to acknowledge that these were terrible things that happened, and then to move forward. Nobody went to jail. If you were a white South African who did some horrible things during apartheid and you came forward, you were given amnesty, you know. And I'm not saying that we need truth and reconciliation commissions, but we do need to face our past in the same way and face the fact that, yeah, there were bad things that happened. I mean, when Michelle Obama just a few days ago spoke about how the White House was built by slave labor, people were fact-checking it. Seriously? You're fact-checking that? I mean, Washington, D.C. is in the South. It exists in the South because that was a way to convince the Southern colonies to join the American Revolution. Yeah, there was slave labor that built the U.S. Capitol, that built the White House. You know, this is not...
we know news. Slaves built the pyramids, so why are we surprised?
Yeah,
right?
And the thing is that it's we can't deny that, and it just means that we have to accept these terrible things and move forward. And part of that means solving the problems. Part of that means just recognizing how far we've actually come. How can we know that we're getting closer and closer to the American ideal unless we know what we were beforehand?
Right. We know we have this mythology of how bad it was under British rule, and then we have this. Then there's like this big giant black hole of not think about details. Yeah. So you were talking also, I think, about because when it comes to truth and reconciliation, I always think of a child, and do you have children?
No.
Okay, so when you have kids and they do something wrong, if you're a family where children get in trouble when they do something wrong, as soon as they do something wrong, their brain shifts away from any form of compassion or regret and shifts into self-protection and hiding and running away. Yeah. And if you're not going to punish someone and you look at a mistake as a learning opportunity, then they stay in their place of compassion. And now they actually start to feel bad about someone whose feelings they've hurt and they care about them. So when I think about the police, the role that the police have been put into in America with regard to institutionalized racism, which is often a top-down, and you walk into that environment and now it is all around you. So what do you think about how we could improve or looking at history and talking honestly about it, I think would help us begin to eliminate institutionalized racism in the police force?
Institutionalized racism is one of those things where it's not just one person at the top or a group of people at the bottom who are causing the racism. It's a historical memory in a sense.
Right.
You have these are experiences that police officers have gone through that feeds into the racism that exists in the police departments where it does. And it does come from an experience that needs to be acknowledged. That doesn't make it right. But we need to recognize that there is a historical memory that feeds into this. It's not easy to break because it's a historical memory. You have an older cop who says, hey, you better watch out for XYZ group of people. And the younger cop who just joins the police force, if all of a sudden he has instances that prove that to be true, he's going to start thinking the same way. Whether it's actually true in fact or not, we have a tendency to look for facts that reinforce something
Exactly.
that we already believe. So
what's that called? Confirmation bias.
Yes.
Yes.
Confirmation bias. So, I mean, breaking institutional racism, I mean, we need to acknowledge that it exists. And a lot of people say, oh, what does that do? It does a lot.
Yeah.
It does a lot. Simply acknowledging that a problem exists is the first step.
Oh, yeah, it's huge. It's also a form of, not the word acknowledging, but when you, it's sort of like the idea that you validate. Right. It validates the other person's experience. Right now, there are so many people who want to do not validate the experiences of the African American community or the Hispanic community.
Right.
And, when you're like, oh, well, let's just okay, fine, that happened. Let's just move forward.
Yep. That's not how you move forward. That's not the way to move forward. You can't ignore the past and think that you can move forward and away from it. You have to face the bad, negative things that happen, and that's the only way to be able to move forward.
Take the scab off and let the pus out.
Very much so.
Yeah.
Very much so.
So the last thing that we were talking about that I think is really fascinating is you had really a great understanding of the difference between the military and the police force.
Yeah. So this actually is something that I read about in a series of novels written by Terry Pratchett. God rest his soul.
He's a good man.
Yeah, passed away recently, but he had a series of books called Discworld novels, and in that, one of his main recurring characters is the commander of the City Watch, which is the police force for the city. And what he said was that he's not a soldier. He was very adamant about the fact that he's not a soldier, because that's what separates the police from the military, is that police officers, they are officers, they deserve our respect. They are not soldiers. They're not supposed to be soldiers. If they start acting like soldiers, then that defeats the purpose for their existing. Then, why not just have the army police our streets?
Didn't you say like over 100 years ago or so, it was pretty normal for basically your peacekeeping force on the ground was actually your military, and that the idea of civilians as peacekeepers.
Yes.
And what's that us and them thing you were talking about? Because not just Terry Pratchett, but you also have a bunch of people you've spoken to who are in the military, active and retired.
Yeah, so a lot of people I've spoken to, just in general in my life, who have served, or are actively serving, they have seen their mission, what they have been taught in their military lives, is that their ultimate mission is to protect. Protecting the United States, protecting their fellow soldiers, their fellow Americans. It's about protecting them. But the difference is that they are protecting us from them.
America would be the us and the rest of the world is them.
Yes. I mean, just as an example, it could be a specific enemy, but either way, the protection is happening from them. It's somebody else who is attacking us.
Right.
And that's why the function of the police force is so fundamentally different. They are our fellow civilians, our fellow citizens, who are not here to protect us from an outside force. They're here to help us uphold the law and order that we have agreed on as a society, the rules to follow. That's what they're here for. They're not here fundamentally to protect us from those gangs or something. If anything, they should be helping those gang members as well.
They oftentimes are.
Yeah, and oftentimes police programs are doing that.
Right.
But it is fundamentally different. Like, even the people they're arresting are not the enemy.
Right.
They're still their fellow citizens. They're delinquent fellow citizens, maybe, but they're still fellow citizens.
Right.
And that's why cops are civilians. They're not soldiers.
So when we militarize them, what does that do?
So when we militarize them, I remember I was in New York when the Occupy Wall Street movement was happening, um, and I remember there after a couple of instances of some of the officers in riot gear pepper spraying someone right in the face. I remember I heard a quote in the New York Times where an older police officer, a real veteran of the NYPD, said, "What happened to talking people down? We were taught to talk people down. What happened to that?" And part of that is the militarization. I mean, when you give police, local police a tank,
Right.
then you start thinking, okay, I've got a tank for a reason. I've got this, I've got
There
a
must be
Humvee
something
for a
scary out there
reason.
that I'm supposed to use it against. Yeah.
Sometimes it's that. Sometimes it's just, gung ho, got a tank. I'm gonna be Rambo. But either way, what it's doing is feeding into this notion that there is an us and there is an enemy that the police is fighting.
Within us, though, that's dividing the people into us and them.
And that's why you can't have that attitude.
Right.
You can't have that attitude as a police officer of us versus them, because it's all us. There is no them. Police can't do that. I mean, they shouldn't do that. And that's why the concept of police was even invented. Because soldiers, they're trained in a particular way, and I mean, the U.S. military does its job brilliantly, but that is its job. And it's not well suited to the concept of a police force.
Right. I love that. It's just, we tend to just sort of have these vague ideas of how things are. We just assume that they're accurate, and then when you're questioning something, you're thinking, well, wait a minute, wait. Okay, so wait, why do we do that, or how is that supposed to be done? Then it can be really. I mean, it's just fascinating to me. There's a whole new way of thinking about the police force in that very specific, intentional way. They are there to support us and help us because they are part of we.
Yes.
And then we militarize them, and that just makes them feel like it's an us and them environment.
And also, all of a sudden, you're then instilling we instill as a society the attitude that they are not that different from soldiers.
It's true. We're starting to think that way.
Yeah, and that shouldn't be the case.
Yeah. When you go to some European countries, like my mom, she always talks about the bobbies in Britain.
Right.
And when I was in Denmark for 16 days this year at the beginning of June, I never saw a police officer in 16 days or a police car. I don't even know what they look like. And I spent about 4 to 6 hours a day walking the streets of Copenhagen, Helsingør, Roskilde, all these big giant cities all over the place. But you go to downtown Seattle or during a normal day, and you walk every block, you're going to see, every 5 minutes, you'll see 2 cops walking by you. In Denmark, 16 days, never saw a single one. So, there's the militarization of America became more clear to me as I got out of America.
That makes sense.
Okay. So,
yeah.
All right, so actually we're sort of out of time, so if you want to say goodbye to everyone.
Thanks for listening to my rambling. I hope, especially the first part of it, this is the end. This is a political event after all. And I hope you remember that there is a giant group of your fellow citizens for whom this election really truly is existential for us. It's almost it's practically a matter of our survival as immigrants in this country. So I hope you remember that. And I hope you remember that we are your fellow Americans.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you so much.